Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. My name is Melissa Reich, and I am your Bish therapist, a real life therapist turned pop culture enthusiast, if you will. First, I want to say thank you to all the new listeners and everyone who has been and just continues to be so incredibly supportive. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, thank you, thank you. My last episode was quite supersized. I could not stop myself from talking, apparently, about the 3-part interview between Bethenny and Rachel. Right after that episode aired, Bethenny dropped another part of the podcast called The Aftermath. And I had so many people reach out to me about, just her presentation and the things she said. So today's podcast is going to feature a discussion of the aftershocks of the aftermath, if you will, which for people in LA holds very serious meaning. Hurricanes and earthquakes, oh my. So I hope all my wonderful, beautiful LA people and listeners are safe and okay. But here in Pennsylvania, the aftershocks are only going to be based on what comes out of your Bish therapist's mouth. So no fear there. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give an overall impression of listening to the full, Aftermath podcast. I'm going to talk about a couple of points that I felt were really important that she brought up. And the last thing I'm going to do is address some information that was in my last podcast that I needed to kind of take a reassessment of, an addendum, if you will. What I want to say is that I am imperfect. I'm human, and sometimes I get things wrong. And, I'm happy to own that. So there's a couple of things since the last podcast dropped that I wanted to just clear up a little bit at the end of the podcast. So the first thing that I want to start with is the overall impressions of the Aftermath podcast. My first impression is similar to the impression that I had from the interview, which is just so many ads. I mean, doing what I'm doing now, I have to kind of take in a lot of content. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of shows. And I was worried I wouldn't have time. However, with the ads, it felt like 15-minute podcast. So again, to me, it's clear that Bethenny's making a lot of money, which good for her. And, she's always been a hustler and self-made. I can respect that. But it just confirms to me that she is making money hand over fist. And, as a listener, that level of ads just feels icky to me, but that's just me. The second thing that I noticed that I wanted to touch on is that Bethenny took a very interesting antagonistic stance, in my opinion. I listened to the podcast and I couldn't help but think, is Bethenny in her Joker era of smearing the lipstick on and just here I am, I think that she did get a lot of hate, which some people felt was deserved. Some people felt like it wasn't. I'm not in the hate camp. I just am here to kind of give unbiased, opinions on both sides of things. But I understand that, Bethenny has gotten a lot of kind of hate and angry messages and things like that. But it seems like she's really leaned into it. The Joker, here I am, I'm going to lean into my new evil era. And I just, as a human, I don't know that feels a little dark for me. I don't know that feels like something that should bring you joy. She said, there were a couple of things that she said, bring it on. I love seeing people be triggered. You're so triggered. It's engagement. Okay, the first thing I want to say about that is you cannot be an ally to Rachel or anybody else while simultaneously mocking mental health. Period. You can't. I don't, and I've said this on another podcast, I do not like when people use the word triggered as some sort of an insult or some sort of a knock. Being triggered is a very real experience for people who have post-traumatic stress disorder and some other mental health issues. I also have complex PTSD, which I've shared before, but if you haven't heard that, I do. So I know what being triggered is from a personal and a professional perspective, and I just really don't appreciate the mocking of it. And so to me, that's a growing edge for her. If you want to be an advocate, you can't mock a mental health issue. It's just not acceptable. Um, the third thing that I noticed while she was kind of on this antagonistic rant is that, she received a lot of messages, and people called her out about, well, what are you doing to help Rachel, myself included. At the end of my podcast, I said, in fact, what are you doing to help her? And Bethenny seemed to take great pride in keeping control of that narrative. And she said, quote, I won't say if I paid her or not, but she said it kind of in an antagonistic way. And it's like, well, that's fine. But when people express concern about Rachel being exploited, we weren't worried about Bethenny's feelings. We were worried about Rachel's feelings and experiences. So, for Bethenny to just double down and just say, well, you all don't know what I'm doing. Okay, fine. We don't, but it's not a good look. And if you're putting yourself in a position of being a helper, I'm not sure, how that helps. But, Bethenny has the right to that, and she has the right to control that narrative and keep that secret. For me as a helper, the one thing that I want to say about this is that anyone who wants to truly be a helper, what we are responsible for doing is assessing how the person in question didn't receive the help that they needed before, and then also asking, what can I do differently to assist you in another way? Okay. And the reason that I say this is that Bethenny is saying, well, you were exploited by Bravo, and you're exploited by this person and that person, so I'm going to do something to help you. But sometimes helpers have an agenda, and when a helper has an agenda, it's not about helping the other person, it's about their ego and their agenda. So for me, that's what I see right now, to be honest with you. I hope that maybe Bethenny behind the scenes really did ask her, how can I help you, in a way that you haven't been helped before. Maybe Bethenny is doing things behind the scenes, but I guess that's between her and Rachel, and we will never know. I just hope that through all of this comes true help for Rachel, because I think, she wants it and she needs it and she's asking for it. So, I hope that she is able to get the help that she needs. The last overall thing I'm going to say is that a lot of people reported being confused by this episode because, the way that Bethenny speaks is very disjointed. It's a little bit chaotic. People use the word manic. I'm not going to use that word because that's a very clinical term to describe a very specific experience. But I understand what people are saying. She has this kind of like pressured way of speaking. It turns a little bit into a word salad. She doesn't, she kind of gets lost in her own thoughts and then, moves between subjects really quickly. And so allow me to be the Bethenny translator, because I'm going to use this analogy. A therapist, and maybe some of you have seen kind of this meme, but therapists, what we're supposed to be really good at is taking a ball of yarn that is knotted and an absolute mess. And as someone's speaking, we knot it and we organize it and then give it back to the person, kind of in a nice, sorry, I hit the mic there, in a nice, nice organized manner. So therapists and people who are hearing somebody's story, we get good at kind of untangling that yarn. And so for me, following her kind of what she was talking about and the subject matter. For me, that's something that I, am very practiced with, organizing something that's very disorganized. So I'm here to, you will all reap the benefits of my, my professional ability to do that. Okay, so now going on to the body of the interview. Bethenny made a lot of what I will term ego statements. A lot of people noticed that she talked a lot about herself and her wins and, her accomplishments. And, so some of the things she said, she called herself a rainmaker. She says she broke the internet. It went viral, #1 worldwide. There was even a part of the podcast that Bethenny admitted that she ignored hearing about other people's stories, like with the Reality Reckoning and Bravo. So like the people who had complained before about mistreatment, Bethenny says, I ignored hearing about people's stories because it wasn't about me. She said that. I mean, you can go back. She said that verbatim. What I believe that she meant was, she tried to stay in her own lane, but what she said to me also means that, if she feels that it's not about her, she's not interested. And, okay, so then I guess my question is, well, how is this about you now? And why are you interested now? Because it seems as if she spent a lot of the podcast trying to explain that she's not benefiting or profiting in any way. She doesn't want to be on TV anymore. She makes a lot of money through her TikTok and her YouTube and all this stuff, which great, good for you, mazel. But so I'm wondering for her, like, what has changed that now you are the spokesperson of this, and before you just ignored it because it wasn't about you. So, if I had the chance to interview Bethenny, which I won't, I would want to ask her those questions. But I'm going to kind of have a drop the mic moment here for a minute, which is, I believe that true confidence is rooted firmly in humility. I'm going to say that again. True confidence is firmly rooted, or at least should be, in humility and gratitude, I would argue. I'm a really confident woman. I'm really accomplished. I've, survived cancer twice. I've done a lot of things. And I find that, my confidence is quieter. And, everybody's different with that. I think it's great to be confident. And I think it's great to be your own #1 fan. But there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. And personally, I find Bethenny's approach very off-putting. I find her statements and, I just find it to be pretty ego-based. And, that's the funny thing. Confidence and arrogance have different energies around them. And I think what people were picking up on is she kind of had this very antagonistic, egotistical energy about her, which people could feel when they listen and, and things like that. So I'm also going to go as far to argue as her approach, her ego-driven statements and comments are actually undermining her. Because, I think that confidence speaks loudest when it's, humble and grateful. And, that's just my opinion. That's just, what I perceive to be as problematic in how she approached everybody. So if this resonates with you, please let me know. These are just my observations. Now, going on to the actual interview itself, she talked about, she claimed that Rachel was young, she made mistakes, she's apologetic, she was cast as a villain. She also brought up a lot of outside facts and figures and characteristics and all of these things. So, for example, she made the wild statement. I literally have in my notes wild statements, and then I have a couple of them underneath. So, one wild statement that she made was that Bethenny believes that Ariana forgave Tom enough to continue to live together. What? So, for those of you who don't remember or recall, or maybe, aren't as obsessive Housewives fan maybe as I've been, because I've been a pretty obsessive fan in the past, admittedly. Bethenny, when her and Jason were getting a divorce, there was this like multi-million-dollar apartment. It was like her first apartment. She was so proud of it. And there was like a fight over it. They were living together for a while, even though they were separated or divorcing. And then, she ended up giving that to Jason, or he got it in the divorce. I'm not exactly sure of the outcome, but I do know that there was a period of time that her home, her very special, very expensive home that she spent a lot of money on, was held hostage. And I find it such a wild statement that she can be so flippant and disregard the difficulty that underlies probably what Tom and Ariana are dealing with, especially because she's experienced it. So I think this is one of those things when it comes to Bethenny that people just feel really frustrated with her, because it's a little bit hypocritical. I mean, people have asked me, why are Tom and Ariana still living together? And I have no idea. My best guess is that it has something to do with legalities. Again, I don't know the legalities in California. Bish therapists, please reach out. I should mention, I love the Bravo Docket ladies. They have been super helpful to me, so shout out to them. And I definitely am going to talk to them about some of these questions that I have too. Maybe we can even collaborate and bring you a podcast in the future. But when you own a very expensive home with somebody and you're not married, it depends on a lot of things, like whose name is on the home, whose name's on the deed, who has invested more money, etc. It's a complicated situation is the point. So the fact that they're still living together certainly does not tell me that Ariana's forgiven him enough to live together. No. In fact, I know that Ariana talked about the fact that Tom wouldn't leave. She wanted him to leave and he wouldn't. And, it was a mess. So whatever's happening is messy, but it's certainly not because they're both just like cool with each other. That's insanity. She talked about Alex Baskin and LVP, and she literally called them liars. And she said they're protecting the realm. So Bethenny kept talking about the realm, which is like, I guess it's like the upside down of reality TV, because she kept referencing that too. Which, for people who don't know what that is, that's a Stranger Things reference, which I'm obsessed with Stranger Things, and I'd be happy to do a podcast on that too. So if anyone is interested, please let me know. So that's a big statement, and listen, Alex Baskin did say that. I said that on my last podcast. He said that Vanderpump Rules would not have been renewed without the scandal of it all. So I just thought it was interesting that, Bethenny she brought out her bazooka and was just like, these two are liars and they're protecting the realm. So interesting. It'll be interesting to see if they have anything to say about that. She mentioned, Tamra Judge and the whole naked wasted thing from like an way earlier season of Real Housewives of Orange County, and it involved Gretchen and her son. And I'm a subscriber to Two Teas in a Pod. I really think it's a great podcast. And they talked about this, and Tamara is really angry. She feels that Bethenny had no right to bring up her child. And so this has started a complete storm. But what is so fascinating to me about what she's doing, as a therapist, I want to explain this to you, because this is a tactic that people use either to distract, to win an argument, or both. So what happens is people who kind of have an overarching need to just be right will bring up something maybe that they've done that deserves some constructive criticism and say, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And what about that? And it's like, this is such a common technique, and it's really effective, right? Because the average person gets very distracted. They forget what they were even talking about to begin with. And um, and then the person feels like they've won or they're right or what have you. So typically, going back to the yarn ball analogy, typically this works because people can't follow the yarn ball, but guess who can? I'm a professional yarn ball follower. So there's no way to confuse me or distract me. It's just not humanly possible. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you all, and hopefully too it validates your frustration and your confusion. It was confusing for me too. I just am able to move the pieces around to make it a whole picture. So the last thing that I'm going to mention today is on Instagram, Bethenny was called out for how she verbally accosted Luann in the past, and the poster felt like Bethenny should apologize to Luann. Bethenny responded, quote, "I think saving her life was a good start," end quote. And then on the podcast, the aftermath of it all, she doubled down on this claim that she saved Luann's life by making a couple of statements, which I'm going to share with you. Bethenny claims that she was the sole reason Luann was not exploited and forced to attend the season 10 reunion. For those of you who don't remember, season 10, Luann was struggling with, I'm going to use her terms. I don't know that she ever said alcoholism, but she was struggling with a substance use disorder. To be clear, I'm not diagnosing. I'm just trying to repeat what she has said. So Bethenny claims that Bravo wanted to exploit Luann's alcoholism by having her attend the reunion in an ill state for the spectacle of it all. Now, Bethenny claims that she threatened to boycott the reunion unless Bravo paid for her treatment and paid her for the missed reunion. Okay, so Bethenny is saying that she is the reason that Luann got paid for the missed reunion, got into treatment, and got that paid by Bravo because Bethenny threatened to boycott unless that happened. Bethenny also reminded the audience that for Luann, she, and listen, everything I'm telling you is true. She hired lawyers to help Luann's legal issues. She prevented her from buying a $7 million house. So when Luann was in her addiction or in her active addiction, she was trying to buy this house. She asked Dennis for the money, and Bethenny did prevent it, but she just said to Dennis, "Don't do that. She's sick. We can't help her with this." So that's the truth of that. Bethenny held the intervention for Luann, which she did. And she got her into a treatment facility, which she did. She did all of those things. Here is where, as a therapist, and specifically an addictions therapist, here's where I have a real problem. While Bethenny did a lot to help, for those of you who either are in recovery or have an understanding of recovery, recovery is a daily decision that sober people make consciously. Hear that clearly, okay? Getting someone into treatment is step 1 of 1 trillion. It is great. It's super helpful. Bethenny did all those things, but I don't like that her comment undermined the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to not only get into recovery, but to stay in recovery one day at a time. I feel that, I have some people who follow me in the sober community, which I'm so grateful for. Many reached out. Some people weren't offended, but the majority of people were. And I just think that a truly altruistic person who's helping someone doesn't see themselves. I don't see myself as someone who is a savior. I'm a helper. Okay. I'm a helper. I'm a guide. When clients have, life-threatening issues, whether it's mental health or addiction, I have helped people. I've had the honor and the privilege of helping people get through their darkest moments. I'm not a savior. I'm a helper, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to do so. I think that her attitude about helping is just really gross. A truly altruistic person who values helping sincerely, I don't think would ever take such a wild stance. I'm not saying she didn't help Luann save her life, but Luann saved her own life. And everyone who's listening to this, who is working their butts off in recovery one day at a time, I see you, and you're doing the hard work. Keep going. If you're struggling and you've thought about treatment, take this as a sign. It's time to go. It's time to do whatever you need to do to get well. But I just feel like as an addictions therapist, I needed to give this little PSA and explain myself as well, because I posted about it on Instagram and some people got really angry and unfollowed me, and which is fine. But I will always be an ally. Always. My allyship is rock solid. So that's never going to change. If people don't like it, then that's too bad. The last piece that I'm going to bring up before we end the podcast is on the note of addiction and recovery. I wanted to make some addendums, as I mentioned in the top of this episode, based on some things that I had said or didn't get to circle back to last podcast. People brought to my attention, which I agree with, and this is why I'm bringing it up, that Rachel talking about Bravo not paying for her treatment and things like that. The first thing I need to point out is that treatment is a privilege, and it's not a privilege that's given to all people, especially folks who are underinsured, uninsured, unhoused, struggling socioeconomically. Treatment facilities like this, they're not an option for regular folks. And the fact of the matter is that Rachel could have chosen a more reasonably priced facility. In fact, here in Pennsylvania, I live in the Poconos, and there is a nationally ranked treatment center here in Pennsylvania. It's called Caron, Caron. If you're looking into treatment, please look that up right now. Many notable celebrities, which I'm not going to mention, you can Google it. Many notable celebrities have attended Caron. It takes insurance. It has financing options. So the point is that you can get sober anywhere. I have seen people go into treatment 20, 30, 40 times, and they decide to get sober on a cot at the Salvation Army because they're just done. So hear me clearly. You can get sober anywhere when you're ready. Readiness to me is the number one key. 2, treatment is a privilege. And, regular people who attend treatment have rules and parameters that we have to go by when going through our insurance, right? So again, Rachel could have said to Bravo, I'm looking into treatment. What will you cover? Because the point is that Rachel's treatment at the Meadows, which is extraordinarily expensive, like beyond. Some of these LA treatment centers, I quite frankly don't understand them, because to me, it's so inaccessible to regular people. I don't get it, but I get it. It's about making money. I just don't like it. So she could have checked with Bravo first and said, hey, I need to go to treatment. I need some help. What will you guys pay for? Whatever. And then the last thing is that, I talked a lot about Americans with Disabilities Act and, mental health accommodations and things like that. To be clear, requesting employer accommodations requires filing proper paperwork to gain accommodations in accordance with the ADA. So I got a lot of comments about that. And again, I'm sorry I didn't get to circle back to it, but that's, there's rules and procedures and policies, paperwork needs to be filed, things like that. Employers aren't psychic. So maybe Andy thought that there was an issue, but he's not a doctor. He's not a psychiatrist. And so we can only help, people can only help us if we help ourselves and advocate for ourselves and say, here's what's going on, here's what I need. Now, I understand that's hard for some people, but I think what I'm saying is that there were some missed opportunities from Rachel's side of things and from her family too. I mean, it is curious to me that her family, seems to be making some interesting decisions. And I don't know a ton about that, but you would think too, as adults who maybe have a little bit more awareness of how insurance in the world works, I'm just surprised she wasn't given, more help around that. And maybe she was, I don't know. So for today, my friends, this is going to be it for me today. Now, next episode, I'm going to tease this because for me, the next episode is going to be very exciting. I am going to share a little bit about your Bish therapist, which, I just talked a lot about how Bethenny talked about herself, but I am actually going to share, I've had some very cool experiences and I'll tease it a little bit. So as a 2-time cancer survivor, one of those times I got to make a wish and I met the cast of Friends. So my next episode is going to talk a little bit about that. It's going to talk a little bit about cancer survivorship, some tips and tools. I'm going to share my cool experiences with you. And, you all have been so wonderful and reached out to me, and I've loved getting to know people. So I want you to know a little bit more about me too. I hope you find it interesting. So for today, I'm going to get on to the legal disclaimer of it all. But for those of you who have been watching and continuing to support me, thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you very much. Okay, friends, on to the disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with your Bish therapist via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback. Thank you so much. Until next time.